Welcome everyone, we're gonna get started. Thank you for coming. So first things first, if you need to use the restroom, they are out by the elevators. There are drinks in the back, so feel free to get up and get a drink. So how about show of hands first? Raise your hand if you went to Tableau conference. All right, awesome. So a lot of you'll get new information of what you missed while we were all at conference. All right, so I'm gonna go over our website because I always forget to do this. So if you go to DC TUG, TableauUserGroup.com, you can actually get all of our future meeting information, all of our previous meetings. So like I have recordings of all of them. Also, all of the PowerPoint presentations from previous meetings will be up there. You can share them with your colleagues if they aren't able to make it to the meeting, or if for some reason you aren't able to make a meeting in the future, then you will know that they're up there. I also have announcements up there sometimes. I have a distribution list as well.
Yes.
What was that?
DC TUG.
Yeah, DCTUG.com. Yeah. So I also have a distribution list of my own, and I normally try to announce these meetings a day or two before the mass Tableau one goes out. So if you want to get a spot every time and not get on the wait list, then you can join my distribution list.
Yeah.
All right, if you would like to present or host in the future, I have a sign-up sheet that was by the name tags. So if you just put your name and email there, then I can get in contact with you. Instead of doing traditional introductions this time, I did something a little bit different. So this is Alicia. She has her Twitter handle up on her slide, so Dreams of Data. This past year was her first time attending Tableau conference. Her favorite part was Devs on Stage, which you're going to talk about. So if you don't know what that is, then you will get to see it. And then her favorite new feature is Viz in a Tooltip, which I know is a feature that a lot of people are looking forward to. And her favorite type of graph is a scatter plot.
All right. Hey, everybody. I'm Alicia, and I'm with University of Maryland, College Park. And as Brittany said, this is my first Tableau conference this year. I just started using Tableau in May, and I love it. It's awesome. And I'm really glad I went to the conference because I had a chance to meet a lot of great people doing great work with data. So I'm going to show you some of what they're doing, and I'm going to show you how you can also do more good with your data. So what I want to do is, oh yeah, that's right. I wanted to mention to you the reason I titled the talk this way. Do you want me to use the microphone?
Yes, I guess because back they don't hear you.
Are you not hearing me?
It's hard.
Okay, I can turn it on. No problem.
Now use your inside voice, yeah.
Yeah. So up here we are like,
Okay, can you hear me? All right, very good. So the reason I titled my talk, Do Good with Data, is because that is a message that Tableau spreads. And so much so that they had swag with that message on there. And so I saw this swag, I know about this message. This excites me, I like this. I want to do good with data. But I'm a social psychologist by training, and so for me, what that means is we're actually changing behavior with our data visualizations. So that's what I'm looking for, that's what I'm interested in, that's what I like to geek out about. So when I search changing behavior through data visualization, so as a social psychologist, I'm interested in how we are influenced by the media, by other people, by the world around us, and how that changes how we think and feel and what we do. And so I'm interested in knowing, does data visualization actually change what people do? But this is the only headline I found. That research doesn't exist. But I want to show you some examples of people doing this, attempting this, and talk about how can we make that happen. So changing behavior through data visualization, Amazon must be testing it because right here's the data viz that I know when I want to buy a book, I'm looking at this data viz. And this is affecting whether I buy this book or not. So we've got the bar chart here, we've got quantitative data, We've got qualitative data. So for me, this affects my behavior. I see this as a nice example of how data viz can affect our behavior. And actually, when I dug deeper into this topic, I found out, maybe you guys knew this, I didn't, there's a whole field called persuasive technology. Have you guys heard of this? Do you know about this? So this is a conference, this is our 13th conference, and it's all about how do computers affect our behavior. It happens all the time. When you get a message that's telling you it's an alert that you have to install some update, right? When Facebook sends you an email that says, come back, make more friends. This is technology trying to get you to do something. And so that's part of what persuasive technology measures and is interested in. And then I want to make sure to point out, this is changing people's attitudes and behaviors through persuasion and social influence, right up my alley, not through coercion, not through deception. What we want to try to do is we want to encourage people to do those behaviors they want to do anyway, but just nudge them along, make it easier for them. So it's like your Fitbit, right? Things like that, that we can use technology to encourage people to save more money, to encourage people to make more choices, to be healthier. That's what they're interested in. So their scope for next year's conference, their theme is making a difference, yay. And then when we look at the different domains that they're interested in, it's the sustainable environment, being able to increase, let's see, medicine, healthcare, and then all the way down here, I don't know if you can see this or not, visualization. There it is. That's a topic, that's a thing. And so that excites me, that I plan to go to this conference. Anybody else want to come with me? Yeah. Maybe? I'm going to this. I just found out about it last week. So this is exciting to me. This tells me that there's hope that our field of data visualization is maybe tapping into this, looking at this, can possibly have some momentum here. So let's go back to that headline. So again, this was the only one I found that had any of that language, changing behavior through data visualization. So I want to tell you a little bit about what this blog post was about and what they did. So there's lots of companies out there that are trying to get their staff to be more energy efficient, to not use as much energy, to not consume as much energy in their workplace. And so what sometimes people do is, they have smart buildings and they want to track that energy usage and then let their staff know, look, we're using a lot of energy during these hours. Is there something we can do to change that? So this company said they've been trying for years and years, trying to get their staff to use less energy. They finally started to work with a company called Lucid. And what Lucid did is they installed a dashboard right in the reception area that clearly showed how much energy was being used in the different parts of the office. And they said that they had 2 floors of an office building that they were using. And they said, here's what we're going to do, guys. We're going to put this dashboard up. It's going to show how much energy all of you guys are using. We're going to have a competition between the 2 floors. We're going to see which floor can drop their energy consumption the most. And whichever floor wins gets a prize. You want to know what the prize was? They said everybody on that floor that wins gets cupcakes. That was the prize. So cupcakes plus data visualization equals behavior change. So they did this for a month, and then they checked in after a month. They found the winning floor dropped their energy consumption by 20% compared to baseline, and the runner-up dropped by 12%. So it worked. Finally, it worked. And so what they report in the post is that that is the possibility then. That's evidence that if we share this information, we make the data visible, that there is that possibility of change. But what I want to make sure to point out here is the other point, actionable. So what that means is they didn't just say, here's a dashboard, here's some data, here you guys can see how much energy you're using. They also made sure to point out, hey everybody, here's some things you can do. So make sure to put your computer to sleep when you're not using it. Make sure to turn off the lights in the rooms you're not using, like the conference room, or if you leave for lunch, for your office. Use natural light when you can. You don't need these lights on if you've got natural light coming in. And so they made sure to tell people, here are some steps you can take, because that's important too. You can't just show data and say, here you go, whatever you want to do. You have to tell them, here's how you can change these numbers. Here's what you can do about it. So they had success there, and that's great. And then another idea that comes to mind to me when I think about us having data that's visible and actionable is I think of the Biz for Social Good project. Are you guys, anybody familiar with this project? So this project, the founder is Chloe Sang, and so what she does is she connects with nonprofits, people doing great work, and it's nonprofits that have some trouble getting their message out there. They're doing a lot of great things, but they're not sure how to be able to communicate that effectively. So she gets that data, and then people in the community have a chance to visualize that and send that message out, and then more people learn about these projects, more people have a chance to support the projects. So I want to focus on a few that were done by Michael Mixon. I met Michael Mixon at the conference, and I was so happy to have a chance to chat with him because I love his work. He uses imagery, and it's amazing, and he's just a rock star. So this is one of Michael's data visualizations of the Hidden Genius project. And so it has a great message, right? That's important too. It's a compelling message, it's engaging, it brings you in. He tells people about, here's the problem, here's how this organization is helping, and then maybe you can't see that far back there, but it does say, learn more, donate. So that link is right on the visualization of what you can do about it. Here's another example, another one by Michael Mixon. So again, we've got the message, it's compelling, there's imagery, it draws you in. Here's the problem, here's how the organization is helping to solve this, and this one's even bigger down there. How can you help? There's the call to action. You can donate, you can become a volunteer, you can become a mentor. We make it really clear to people, click on this, that's the next little baby step, just right here, there you go, it's right there for you. So, fun story, so I met Michael at the conference, and we got a chance to chat, and just telling each other about, this is our background, this is who we are. I said, I'm a social psychologist, and the reason I'm a social psychologist is because I took a social psych class in college, and we were assigned this book. I brought it with me, The Social Animal. So we were assigned this book, and I started reading this book, and I couldn't put it down. It was so engaging, so fascinating. It was unlocking all these secrets of human behavior, why we do what we do. And I said, that was it. I started reading this book, and I thought, all right, well, I'm going to become a social psychologist then. And so I told Michael about this, and he said, oh yeah, was the author from UC Santa Cruz? I was like, yes. He said, oh, I took his class. I took his social psych class. I went there. Like, you learned from the master? I was fascinated. I thought, that's amazing, Michael. Good for you. That the guy has retired now, Elliot Aronson. But Michael had a chance to take his class, and I think it paid off. So I want to point out, this book, these things I'm telling you, are written in this book too. The idea that you can give a compelling message, but without a call to action, without a specific instruction for what people do with that message, it's not as effective. So that's social psych 101. So Michael knows it, I know it. Now I'm sharing it with you. Here's some other nice examples. This is from Johnny Walker, another person that does amazing work with Tableau. So this, if you haven't seen this yet, this is all interactive. It's a timeline that you can click through. It's amazing. And Johnny's doing just great work. So yeah, he was like the first person I said hi to when I got to the conference. But I recognize you. I know you. I love your work. So there it is. Please donate. There's this call to action, as it should be. Here's another nice example. It's smaller. It's down here. But there it is. Please donate. So I contacted Johnny this morning to say, oh, I'm gonna talk about some of your business today. I'm gonna talk about having a call to action. And he was like, yeah, everybody should have a call to action, right? I was like, right? I agree. Because it just makes it that much more effective. Here's one last example for you. this is one of mine. So this is about how much water consumption it takes to produce different types of food. And so because I know a little bit more about this background topic, I did know about other possible resources to lead people to. So I do practice what I preach. I have the message down here. Does this interest you? Do you want to do something about it? Do you want to eat less meat? Learn more about Meatless Monday. It's right there. Here's a link. No big deal. Just click on it. Just see whether you want to do something about it. Maybe think about not eating as much meat on Monday. It's a small step, but it's there. If people are willing to take it, I give it to them. So this particular visualization, this was one of 3 of the favorites that week. This was in late July, and I was very honored and excited to be picked as a favorite. So this was for Makeover Monday, if you're not familiar with the project. It is a project run by Andy Kriegel and Eva Murray. And what they do is they show people each week a visualization, and they give them the data, and they say, make it over. Do whatever you want with it. Find a new story, create a new type of chart, and share it with us. And then we get a chance to see what everybody's created. And then each week they do a blog write-up where they post, here's lessons learned, here's some of our favorites, here's what people did well, here's what people needed to reconsider for next time. And so in the blog post, Eva Murray wrote that she appreciated this viz because I linked to Meatless Monday, because I had that resource for people to take action. So that's like possibly put it over the edge of great, because not many people do that, and so it stands out as something that's a little bit more unique, but has a great message to it. So that is just one more example that people take notice when you give them that information. Right, so the next thing I wanted to, just a couple of last points to finish up with. I had mentioned how there's really not any research on this, and that is the case. The closest I get when I try to search for this is there's some folks at NYU, including Enrico Bertini is the name I'm familiar with, who are looking at attitude change. So that's what this study was about. It was about trying to change attitudes with data visualization, which is not the same thing as behavior change, but again, it's a start, we're getting there, it's close. So their main goal, what they were trying to test was whether a graphical presentation of data makes that message more persuasive. And so they had a couple of different topics, but for example, they were trying to present the argument, video games do not lead to youth violence. And so they're trying to see whether people's attitudes on this topic shift based on whether they're seeing just a table of data about this topic or whether they're seeing a data visualization about it. And so this was what people would see. So one group of people saw just data about, let's see, when you ask kids why do you play video games and what they're reporting, there was only some people that said, I play video games to get my anger out or because I like guns and weapons. Otherwise, kids are saying, oh, it helps me relax. I just do it when I'm bored. It's just fun. So it's just showing people that information in support of that claim. And on the other hand, other people saw a graph of that same information. So turns out, if people are already neutral on a topic, so they don't already have a strong attitude either way, if they're neutral, they can be shifted to have an attitude more in favor of what's being proposed. But it doesn't work if they already have a strong attitude. So that was something else that they found. You have to be neutral first, and then having a chart will be more effective than having a table. So anyway, that's just some of the research that's being done in this realm, in this field, about attitude change. Okay. So because there's not much work on this, so right, a lot of what I see when I read about research on data visualization is we're asking people, do you interpret these numbers correctly? So in the battle between bar charts and pie charts, which one is more effective, right? Bar charts win. That's always going to be something that that people are able to better understand the numbers by. And so I think it's probably because of that focus on, how do we define effective data visualization? Oh, yeah, let's just that. that we see a lot of focus when we look at criteria. If we're trying to set criteria for data visualization, there's a lot of focus on those types of elements. So this just came out earlier this year. Stephen Few, I'm sure you guys have heard of. No? Oh, he's kind of a big name in data viz. But he came out with a data visualization effectiveness profile. And so it covers these dimensions. So when he's saying when we are trying to evaluate a data visualization, we evaluate it on how useful it is. So is this even information that people care about? How complete the data is? Is it easier or difficult to perceive? How truthful is it? How intuitive is it? When you look at it, do you get it? Can you understand it? And so there's the informative piece, and then he also talks about the emotive piece. So another way to try to evaluate a data visualization is, well, is it engaging? Is it ugly, or is it beautiful? Is it pleasing to the eye? Does the, is it engaging with the viewer? Do they want to continue to look at it and dig into it? And so for him, these are the criteria that he sets to be able to determine whether data visualization is effective. I don't see behavior anywhere on here. I see thoughts, I see feelings, I do not see behavior. That's just not part of our discussion right now. But if somebody told me my data visualization made people want to donate to this cause, made people want to volunteer for this cause, I would say that's effective. To me, that looks like an effective visualization if you can actually drive people to action, right? But that's not part of the conversation right now. So that's where we're at right now, but I do want to leave you with one last kind of major point to, again, kind of make sense of all of this and to really clarify what we're talking about here. So this last point is that there are folks out there that talk about research and study behavior change, and BJ Fogg's one of them. So he has a behavior model, and so for him, behavior change is the result of being motivated, having the ability to do that behavior, and then having a trigger. Which one of these three do you think I'm most interested in? The trigger, right? That's the call to action. That's the trigger. And so again, that's what we tend to do, I think, when we create data visualizations for the wild, right? For the public consumption. We want to make sure that we're motivating them, right? We're giving them a compelling argument. We are engaging them with our visuals. But we don't really think about the trigger piece, right? But that's what I'm talking about. Let's give them a trigger. Let's give them a call to action, something that they can do with this information if they wanted to. We're not forcing them. We're not manipulating them. We're saying, if you wanted to support this cause, here's how you can do it, right? So according to this model then, what happens is the triggers happen, if they happen here. So if somebody's really highly motivated, you gave them information and they said, that really, that fires me up. I want to do something about this. I want to contribute to this cause. I want to right this injustice. Great, give them something to do and they'll do it. Even if they're like, well, yeah, that's kind of important, I think. Even then, according to this model, they'll do it. And even if they have low motivation, which we have no control over. So motivation's really fleeting. It depends on how busy they are that day, their mood, whether it even relates to them at all. But what this model says is, as long as you make it really easy to do, you include that call to action right with the information, just a small step, just a small baby step. Click here, learn more, try this, then people will be more likely to do it. So that gives me hope. That gives me, some assurance that I think this is something that we could do. I think we could use this. Now you know what social psychologists know about how to do human theta. All right? All right, thank you.
This is Erin Simpler Kellett. Her Twitter handle is eSimpler. This was her 5th time attending the conference. I'm pretty sure she's the most out of all of us, yes. Favorite part about TC is meeting Tableau enthusiasts and learning about how they use data at their own organizations. Her favorite new feature is map layers, and her favorite type of graph is a stack bar chart.
And I must say the scatter plot was a close second.
Yeah, right.
Scatter plot divided into matrix. So, hey everybody. Yeah, I know. Isn't it? I love it. It's so good. Hey everybody. Welcome. Thanks for the opportunity to share a little bit about my Tableau customer conference experience. The session I wanted to recap today is actually a Tableau user group session called Community Battle. And yes, it was Street Fighter themed. They had some sound effects. I'm not going to play the sound effects, but they're pretty good. And I must say, I am pretty happy to be presenting to a Tableau user group about a Tableau user group. This meeting here at the conference was actually a global Tableau user group meeting. It involved representatives from different facets of the Tableau community competing in rapid fire data visualization tips. Kind of like a dance-off or a rap battle or something like that. And the tips ranged from ways to organize your Tableau workbooks to make it easier to use, to new chart ideas, or even ways to think about data visualization. And these tips were all bucketed into 60 or 90-second bites. And it was hosted by Paul Chapman from the UK and Christopher Scott from North Carolina. And it was a pretty international audience and international participants. So why this event? The conference had many trainings and sessions, and most of which you can watch on TC Live. And if you haven't checked it out yet, I would definitely recommend checking out. Many of the sessions were recorded, and you can I think even some of the trainings, you can get some of the materials. And I would really recommend it. I've been doing it also for all the sessions I missed. But I wanted to talk about this event because you can't actually find this session on the website. And it also highlights some interesting lessons for this audience. And another thing, as I was thinking about my conference experience, was this event was really fun. It was Street Fighter themed. I learned a lot. I really wanted to share some of this experience. So a couple of lessons that I think it highlights is how broad and wide the Tableau community is. You can make data friends from around the world. You can meet them on Twitter, and then if you can go to conference or they come into town, you can meet them. And then it also highlights that you don't need to take a lot of time to learn something new. 60 seconds could be enough time to actually learn a time-saving tip or a new way to think about data visualization. It doesn't have to be a day-long training or something. The last thing I wanted to highlight about this is that all levels of users can learn new things from others in the community. It's not always new users learning things from experts. It can be experts learning things from other experts or from new users or other ways to use the tool or little tips and tricks with the tool that can help save everybody time. So just a little plug, if you are new to the Tableau community, and I'll go through what the different facets of the community are, but if you're new to the community, you're already making a great start by coming to a Tableau user group meeting, but there's also other ways you can get involved and meet other people in the Tableau community. I really recommend getting a Twitter account if you don't have one, and then just go onto the Tableau website and find the Tableau ambassadors. You can, once you start following Tableau ambassadors on Twitter, Twitter will highlight other people you should follow. And just to, one ambassador you might see on the website is a certain user group organizer of the DC TUG. So Brittany's on there. And so the following people on Twitter and seeing what they're posting is a great way to get inspired and have some interesting conversations and meet some great people. So that was just a plug. Okay, so who are the competitors? Like I said, kind of like a dance-off or a rap battle or a roast battle, if you've seen that show. I love that show. These 4 competitors faced off in head-to-head battles judged by Alyssa Fink and Russell Spangler. So they had 1 minute to do a live demo of a tip or a set of tips, and often they would keep the tips to a theme. So representing Team Social, or social media, was Ann Jackson, who's a social media ambassador. Representing Team Community, or the community forums, another way to engage with users at all different levels, is Zen Master Jonathan Drummy. And the representing team user groups is Lorna Eden, who actually is she was the London TUG Viz tip champ. And some of her tips, you can really see why. And then representing Team Public, which is like Tableau Public and posting a lot of different visualizations, is Skylar Johnson. And he also has competed in the Iron Viz before. So I'm going to attempt to recap some of the tips that jumped out to me. These are just snippets from the competitors. We don't have enough time to cover all of the tips that they covered. They are a lot more polished and better at doing tips than me, so I'm going to do screenshots and just talk through them, and I'm going to go a lot slower. They could fit what I'm going to cover in a minute, they could do in probably 10 seconds. Some of the tips that I'm going to go through are just things that they aren't even necessarily one of their full minute-long tips. It's just maybe a little portion of something that they snuck in there that kind of called out to me and that I wanted to share with you all. And then hopefully, if all technology works, at the end, we can watch a video of the winning final 1.5 minute tip. I can't even summarize this. It's just so full of magic. It's magic. So the first one I wanted to cover was from Lorna, and this is a bit of a time-saving tip. So a lot of you probably have encountered this issue before, but if you haven't, you will. So one cool thing with Tableau is you can use their built-in color palettes, or you can set up your own color palettes. And Matt's nodding over there. Yeah. So this is great if you have if you're at an organization where you have a certain kind of blue you need to be using. And it's really easy to use these built-in blues and greens and things like that that work for your organization if you have a color, if you have a color legend. That's kind of the way to think about it. If you have something on color that lets you assign the colors, like at this top left corner, then you can just assign colors. The problem is if you just have one color, let's say you just have a bar chart, but you don't want to have a color legend for your bar chart. You just want everything to be the same color. Or for this example, you just have a big number and you want the number to be the right color. So Lorna fixed this issue by actually creating a dummy variable directly in your marks card. So you double click into marks and do a single quote and then write color. You can really have it be anything. And note how she spelled color because she's from the UK. It's great. And then once you type it in, it creates like this calculated field, and then you can click and drag it in from your mark shelf into the little color dot, and it actually creates a color legend, and then you can use it as a color palette. So another time-saving tip from Lorna. Thank you, Lorna. You're already saving me a ton of time. You often might find that you want to. So Tableau does really cool things with dates. You can show things by quarter or month or year. But sometimes you are in an organization where quarter doesn't necessarily start in January. Like federal government doesn't. The quarters start in October for whatever reason that is. Normally what you would do was for every date you use, you edit the default properties to change when the fiscal year starts. But let's say you are working on a visualization, but you have a number of dates. One time-saving tip would be you can actually edit all of your dates from a single data source at the same time. If you just right-click on the data connection itself, go to Date Properties, and then you can edit the date properties for all the dates in your entire data set. So this is another time-saving tip from Skylar. So he does some really intricate formatting with his visualizations. And if you've tried to do some fancy formatting, you know, it can kind of take a bit of time. You have to edit your axis colors and your background colors and your font colors and your grid lines and things like that. It's a lot of different clicks. So he recommends do all of that once in one sheet and then have that be your formatting sheet. And then every new graph you create that you want to have work with your dashboard, just right click on the sheet name for your formatting sheet, click copy formatting, and then right click again on your new sheet that you just created and click paste formatting. And the screenshots from his video here show how he was able to take a viz he just created and turn it into one that matches the rest of his dashboard. So if you didn't know about that before, that is a good one to know. I have had people get a little bit annoyed with me that existed because they didn't know it existed before. So I'm like, so sorry if that happens to you. So this is a time-saving tip that comes from Anne. So you probably have dealt with this before, where you want to change the default number format of the measures you're using in your viz. Let's say for me, I like to have my percents rounded to full numbers and not like two decimals. Or in Anne's case, she wanted to add dollar signs and make sure all of her numbers were showing up as currencies. So you could edit the number format of each of your different measures separately, or if you go into your dimensions and measures area, highlight every field you want to have be currency, right click on it and edit the default properties and the number format, and you can in just like 3 or 4 clicks, edit, make all of the measures you want to show up as currency, show up as currency, and edit your number format. So switching gears a little bit here, one of Jonathan Drummy's tips wasn't even a Tableau tip. It was more about data visualization and connecting with your audience. So, and Jonathan Drummy has a background in healthcare analytics. And one number that he was really trying to communicate to his audience, people that worked at a hospital, was that 99,000 people die from a hospital-acquired infection in the US each year. And this means an infection that they got at the hospital and not the disease they came in with. So he found that this number was too big of a number to conceptualize. And it was hard to motivate people. It's like, okay, yeah, stat, okay, 99,000 people, yeah. But if you take 99,000 people a year and divide by 365, then you get around 270 people a year, or 270 people a day, which is about the same number of people that fit on a Boeing 757, which is pictured here. So essentially, every day in the US, hospitals are loading up a plane full of people and crashing it. And so when he started showing this kind of visualization to his doctors, just a picture of a plane to doctors and nurses, this really emphasized what they could, their call to action, and helped bring more emotion into the data. So he says, think about your audience, think about what's going to get your audience to act and make the data relatable to them. So 99,000 is a big number, but one plane is a lot more manageable or understandable. So, and this is the last tip that I'm gonna just throw out here. It's not actually a time-saving tip, but an interesting way to visualize your data. 2 competitors actually use this technique in their tips, and I also really like it. So I wanted to share that you can visualize your dates on a calendar. Using the cool date formats that you can do in Tableau. So you can take a date on columns, make your date be the weekday. So it'll just pull out which day of the week it is. And then on rows, make it the week number so that each week is its own row of data. And then you can show either 1 month of data or an entire year's worth of data in a calendar type of format. And so Lorna visualized it using a heat map, so like looking at profit when it was high and low. And Skylar actually did a stacked bar chart. So every day had a little stacked bar, a little 100% stacked bar chart. And they were able to do that in 1 minute. So I took a lot longer, but that's fine. So that's just a cool way to do it. And now, fingers crossed that this works, and that the audio works. I can't actually find the mouse. Is it touchscreen? Oh, okay. Oh my goodness. Okay, that explains a lot. Okay. Fingers crossed. Come on, come on. Okay. Oh. I can't. Yeah. Yeah. So, and she won. That was the championship one. So now Anne is the global reigning champ. Yes. So, and that link will be on the slides, so you can watch it. It's easier to see not on the big screen. Easier to see just on your computer. Cool. And now it's my talk. Thanks. Thanks, everybody.
Did you want to introduce me, or should I introduce myself?
There we go. All right. This is Edwin. He has been to TC 2 times now. His favorite part is Data Night Out, which if you have never been to Tableau Conference, it's a ridiculous giant party that they host. So this year it was especially fun because Empire of the Sun was there. And his favorite new feature is Maestro, and his favorite type of graph is a box and whisker.
I feel like that one doesn't get enough love, and it has such a cute name, right? But also my second favorite part was the fact that it was, you know, in and among all of these hotels, and so you could get a day spa pass. So you could go in the morning, go to your sessions, and then conclude the day also with more spa. So as Brittany had mentioned, this is my second visit to the Tableau conference, and I just found that I had a lot more capacity to take in information. I think the first time I went, I was really just trying to harvest some like technical skills and trying to understand a little more about the software. But this time I went, I tried to kind of grab a poo-poo platter, if you will, of all different sorts of thoughts about data visualization, where it sits, how to use it, that sort of thing. So I'm going to cover a little bit of everything. So the takeaway from this presentation really is just that there are some awesome presentations out there that you can look at on TC Live. I'm going to highlight the ones that were my favorite under these categories. And then I'm going to talk a little bit about the Qualified Associates exam, which I was able to take this time. Some of you may have been kind of looking around, wondering whether it's worth your time or not. And then I can maybe give you some of my experience and you can assess for yourself. And then lastly, I'll conclude with just a photo of what I did that weekend after the Tableau conference, because some people love Vegas. I'm not one of them. All right, so in terms of the superlatives, as I mentioned, my perspective has broadened a little bit about what data visualization is all about. And I really appreciated Alicia's talk about doing good with data. And so one of the things that really caught my attention was, there was a lot of inspiration to be found. And so in this category for superlatives, there was a county court analyst who was able to assemble a lot of data from the police department and also the county court records and show that there are some racial disparities in Multnomah County, Oregon. And Multnomah County is one of the more liberal places in the country, and still it was hard for her to generate the support for publicizing that kind of information. And but happily, after publicizing the information, people really got together and came up with innovative solutions to address the problem. So some of the things that she had found about the disparities in the criminal justice system was that, compared to white defendants, Blacks were more often convicted for possession of cocaine, amongst many other charges. They were more likely to be stopped, even though they were less likely to be arrested, so that could be grounds for harassment. And also, they constitute about 7% of the county population, and yet they constitute 27% of those in county lockup. So, of course, this is all very heavy information, and I think it's hard to present that to anyone, hard for anyone to see. But she had a couple of tips there as well. So she talked about not using the dashboard as an operational dashboard, because it's something that's really there to show how there are systemic issues and to raise the question. So I think Andy Kriebel was the one who said, data is the start of a conversation rather than the end of a conversation. And I think this is a good example of that. So in highlighting the systemic failing and not placing fault, identifying that there are multiple parts of the system. There's a law enforcement. So when do they stop someone? The courts, how do they charge? Because the charge will, of course, have a direct relationship with the amount of, the severity of the sentence. And then also in terms of corrections, on corrections end, when do people get parole for good behavior? And is that doled out in a fair way? And so it resulted in a lot of initiatives collaborating between these different parts of the criminal justice system that were able to kind of move the numbers. And unfortunately, this is not one of the presentations that was recorded and made available. But if you want to read about Multnomah County, I'll definitely include some links from just like NPR or online news outlets. And so that was the inspiration piece. I thought that was really important to start those conversations by showing people the data. Okay, process. So in terms of process, I think of process as, well, I taught myself Tableau, probably like a lot of you in the room. And so when I approach building something new, I don't necessarily have a very structured way of doing it. Sometimes I start on this end, sometimes I start on the other end. And I just saw a presentation at the conference that really kind of gave me a better idea of like, okay, well, if I do data prep and then I do the design and build, maybe there's another step in between. So the presentation I'm talking about is a presentation given by Spotify employees. And they talk about this process in between data prep and the build and design phase, which is exploratory visual analysis. And so exploratory visual analysis, in short, is being able to take Tableau and use that to just look at your data, not even begin to really construct how the end product is going to look. And as Brittany had mentioned, one of my favorite things about the conference, one of the new reveals was Maestro. And so Maestro is going to be able to help support, what do I see in the data? What pieces of the data might be missing before I sat down to start building my dashboards? For one, nobody likes to be embarrassed by finding out later on, once you've built the whole thing, that something is incredibly wrong because there wasn't that analysis at the beginning to figure out whether your data was the right size based on what you put in, et cetera. And it also may suggest different lines of questioning. So you go into your data perhaps with an idea of what people already want to know, but what about the things that people don't know that they want to know yet? So doing this EVA could really help you explore those avenues. So the Spotify folks talked about a couple of major categories when it comes to EVA. And I won't give examples for all of them because I think it's really valuable to see the presentation in total. But if you can't see, it's data quality, the shape of data, relationships and correlations, patterns and trends, and outliers and quirks. In terms of data quality, she just gives a very practicable example of when you first plug something into Tableau and you join them up. One thing to do is to do maybe a count distinct or count of your identifiers, and then also compare that to the number of records, just to make sure that those two things match. Because you can get very far down the road before realizing that those things don't match, or by doing a join, you've created duplicate records. Shape of the data, of course, is it a histogram? Is it bimodal? Is it skewed to one side or another? Those are just good things to know before you engage in any sort of build. Relationships and correlations. The scatter plot is your friend here in this category. And the Spotify folks talk about the number of followers as the independent variable compared to the engagement score. So when they looked at that in terms of this scatter plot, they could see that within their first 20 followers, the engagement score rises in a linear fashion, but beyond that, it kind of explodes out. And so it kind of suggests, well, maybe there's a different sort of impact that follows have on engagement score when it's 1 to 20 versus later on when you may need to slice it by dimensions to figure out, all right, what else is happening here? So that's a suggestion of lines of questioning just by looking at the data. Patterns and trends, you can look at seasonality, whether there are cycles in your data, outliers and quirks. And this was from a previous talk, but somebody said, show me what's weird. And I think that's a very compelling and interesting way to look at your data beyond how you can reconstruct existing dashboards. Okay, so in terms of perspective, and when I say perspective, I moderate the users group at my organization, which is MedStar. And I always start our gatherings with kind of a two-part vision. One is to use software to make the work of analysts a little easier so that people aren't just replicating the same work month after month, draining hours of their time. But then the second part is to take that extra time and use it to actually explore the data and ask them questions. And now after seeing this presentation at the conference, I would say that there's probably a third part. How do you compellingly communicate the information? So this presentation was done by a Tableau employee, Jewel Laurie. She, I think, has a title of Director of Storytelling. And she's also in a band. So she gave a presentation on how she used her band's data in terms of number of Spotify plays and posts on social media to kind of drill into, to kind of talk about how she convinced her band to take different actions by telling a story. So she talks about there being 7 distinct data story types. There may be more, but it kind of parallels this existing idea that there are certain archetypal stories like the hero's journey or rags to riches. And so I think this is very valuable in terms of, she goes through each type and she breaks down, all right, well, what is the conversation I want to start with each of these story types? And what is the action that I want people to potentially take? And I think just keeping in mind what story you want to present when you pull up a dashboard or when you show somebody a data visualization helps you get grounded to, okay, what kind of questions might I get in response and be able to adequately prepare for those questions. And I'll talk a little bit about point number 2, for example, change over time. So listenership will of course go up and down based on what they're doing out in the community. And so she showed some very cool shortcuts, which I have not yet mastered, where she just takes one worksheet and she's able to kind of capture different areas within that worksheet and put it within the story just to say, like, remember when this inflection point happened? This was when we had that really successful concert out in, out at this bar. And so she's able to kind of show people within this larger workbook, within this larger visualization, what parts of it to focus on and kind of help narrate their experience. And another one is the outliers. So when she talks about outliers, she talks about, all right, well, when we get upticks in listenership, where does that come from and which posts are more successful? So when you look at a very successful post, Is it that it had video, or is it that it had emotional content? However you want to kind of break that down. So starting with the end in mind is very important, and she concludes basically by talking about how when we present data, I think we can all do better and not just put the data out there, because we've looked at it for a long time and it's, to us, maybe self-explanatory, but to bring people along, we have to remember a couple of basic tips. One, which is just, remember that it has to have a clear structure and thesis. Start by orienting and giving context around what you're about to present. Give your points in consumable chunks. So if people use stories, I know I tend to use stories to kind of join together several dashboards as opposed to using stories to kind of move people along a single visualization. That may be a new way to use it. And then when in doubt, if you're not sure how to explain something, try to retrace your steps back to the beginning and figure out how you might be able to present that in chunks to your audience. And then if there's a summary dashboard, you can kind of put that at the end. So once people have been stepped through the story, then they'll want to investigate for themselves, and you can give them that opportunity. All right, and so no conference is complete without a how-to and technical presentation. So this one, I think I had always known about parameters, but I definitely didn't know the extent to which parameters could be used. And I think this really helped settle in my mind that parameters can be used really in any calculation. And so that opens up a whole new world of exploration. And the presenter was, I forget her name, but she had a very sardonic sense of humor. Maybe, yeah, she was talking about her love affair with,
There you go.
with parameters. She called it Parameters, a love story. So she kind of talks about how, like, the first meeting and how that was revealed a whole new world to her. But of course, once she discovered there were limitations to parameters, how she worked through all of that. So after having seen her presentation, I came away with a couple of immediate application sort of things that I wanted to share. So one is, and they're also somewhat related to the other sessions as well. So variable bin size parameter, for example, you can use a parameter to adjust the bin size. So whether you're grouping in, if you're talking about age bins, 5 years or 1 year, you can kind of see where things are kind of peaking. So if you do a bin size of 5 or 10, it might look like a natural histogram, but when you reduce that to a size of 1, you may see these unnatural peaks. So when the Spotify people were talking about their age groups, their average is 27, that was very straightforward, but they saw also that there were weird peaks at multiples of 17. And so because they were analyzing new users and it was 2017, people were just kind of putting in round numbers as their quote unquote birthday. So you can kind of pick up like odd spikes in your data if you are able to adjust the bin parameters. Also, moving average parameters. Moving average isn't something I necessarily use a lot in my day-to-day, but it's very useful for figuring out seasonal patterns, or even like shorter than that. So if you're looking at a week, apparently it's a 6-day smoothing out, and you can kind of see whether they're weekly patterns and get rid of some of those day-to-day fluctuations. You could also do the same for month versus a quarter, so that you can kind of, without having to build multiple visualizations, switch between those different smoothing effects. And since I work in healthcare, we deal with RVUs and units and charges all the time. And without having to build 3 different dashboards, you can just have one dashboard that kind of shows, okay, last year compared to this year, how many RVUs did we bill for these couple of months? And then be able to toggle between that and units and charges. So that really saves a lot of time. She talks about some, generally well-known cases for parameters. You can kind of skim them here. She doesn't really go into these, but she does go into the ones that are a little more advanced. So you may not have thought of these, and if you're interested, definitely check out her presentation. Okay, so the Qualified Associates exam. Overview, there's 2 tiers, I believe, of Tableau developers. So there's the developer side, and then there's the server certifications. I'm on the developer side, so I just make visualizations. I don't really administer the server. I think that the conference might be a good time to take the exam just because it gives you an inflexible deadline. The hardware is guaranteed to work. You don't necessarily need to test on your own laptop beforehand. And there's also, I think, a $50 discount. So win-win-win, right? My motivation for taking this was, you know, I had, at this point, been working in Tableau for about 2 years, and I just wanted kind of a rubber stamp to say, like, hey, I know what I'm doing. But also, it wasn't advanced enough where I would feel like I was pigeonholed into just doing this work, because I find that I do my best in terms of sitting between the people who supply the data and the people who are the clinicians and who do the medical work. And I didn't want to just be sitting in a corner doing dashboards. In terms of the exam prep, it was pretty free form. I just found some free exams online, and people in forums will also suggest questions that they came across, or like similar questions if they've just taken the exam. Doing those questions helped me not only with just identifying gaps I had in my knowledge, because you know you get lopsided just doing what you have to do for your job. So that was nice. And then I also realized that that my problem from middle school and high school continues to haunt me, where I don't read the question closely enough before I try to answer it. And it really helped me to kind of slow down and parse out, all right, like how do I restate what this person has said in terms of the parts that I actually need to build out in terms of a filter or like what I need to connect. So those were all positive externalities of preparing for the exam. The content is kind of outlined here, but you can find a more detailed drill down online where it kind of talks about like specifically what concepts fall in under each of these. And a good starting point would actually be just to download that file and then circle the words that you don't know or that you don't feel comfortable with. And the experience itself, I decided to do it at the beginning of the conference as opposed to the end because I didn't want that hovering over me. And so there's this thing where you actually can't write, which I knew about like the week before, but I was like, oh, is that going to throw me off? Because I like to jot things down. So just know that ahead of time. And also know that it's not just Superstore data. So if you're getting really familiar with Superstore data, you might want to branch out a little bit and be prepared to kind of connect it on the fly. And then, of course, like question 1, I hadn't had my coffee, it was 9 a.m. And so it's okay to skip. And, you know, I hit my pace after having skipped, you know, the first couple of questions maybe. And then I did manage to get to 75% of the questions in the first hour. So it was really solving the rest of the 25% and then going back and checking my answers for the rest of the time. So yeah, you have the ability to mark those questions and go back. So it's not super stressful and the time I think is adequate. So the takeaways, I would say for the exam, what I try to do is know the terminology. I may not know each concept very intimately. You can look things up, but if you don't have the handle for it, that's going to be very hard. So, you know, just, you know, the idea of a set. If you generally get it, all right, know that it's called a set, and then you'll be able to kind of link back to whatever article you need to read to answer that question. And reread the question if your answer is not among the choices, because I don't think not among the choices is an answer. So chances are they didn't do something wrong. You probably misread the, or let me say, I probably misread the question. And then the exam was also very interesting in that they do their best to kind of help bridge and make it easy for you to answer the question. So I realized that the way that they were phrasing the question was actually a helpful way for you to kind of take a pause and say, all right, I want to know year on year, you know, what was the difference between you know, this product and that product. But you can restate it in a way that's already oriented towards how you can build it in Tableau. And so the idea that a well-defined problem is a problem half solved was something that occurred to me while I was taking the exam. And then the exam results, I passed, so hooray. And then I was greeted by this lovely visualization that I wanted to share. I know, it's a third party, so, but nonetheless, it's a little embarrassing. Your score, required score. It's not even a bullet graph. Wow. So needless to say, that was good because then that kind of set the tone for the rest of the conference. I was able to enjoy it. And when I left Vegas, I actually took a couple of days to just explore Utah and take a look at Bryce Canyon and just like, just driving around. It's beautiful out there. So if you're out in Vegas ever, please take the opportunity. All right, that's it.
This was his second time attending Tableau conference, although his first one was the London one. So it was the London on tour version of Tableau conference. Not actually sure how different it is.
It's a Tableau conference wannabe. Much smaller, but it still had some interesting presentations.
Okay. His favorite part about Tableau conference is getting access to the developers of the lab. So if you haven't been to the conference, they actually bring I want to say 80 or 90% of the developers. So the people actually building the tools are there, and you can talk to them about the feature they're developing or one that you are really passionate about or you use a lot. His favorite new feature is the grid, which I am very excited for as well. And his favorite type of graph is anything related to spatial.
Yay. So we're cooking with gas. This is great. I thought it was interesting. It's always interesting for me to attend conferences of any sort. My background is engineering. Back in the pre-internet days, I went to MIT and then ended up 17 years later getting an MBA. And the merger of an engineering solution and then doesn't have a business impact kind of leads directly into working with something like Tableau. So it's kind of fun to be able to see that. The other thing I liked about Tableau in general is that you have so many different walks of life. And so I kind of made it a point to say there is a list of things my boss would like me to attend and there are the things that I really go to. And some of those things are things like charitable organizations and the Tableau Foundation. We're talking to the lab about what's next, even though it may not be on a priority list for our corporation. It may be a light bulb that you say, aha, maybe that's something that I could use that really makes a difference in my daily life. It's funny that Edwin brought up parameters because I use parameters a lot in what I do from a network analysis perspective, and it really made a huge difference. So if you haven't been to the Tableau conference, the dev keynote where they bring up 6 people and they sit around in an armchair, sort of like a talk show, and each one in turn comes up to the podium and says, this is what our team is working on, and maybe you might like it. And so this is the link, the TC Live Tableau. This is the actual presentation of that keynote. And it's really cool because they're very casual and they have a running joke that kind of runs through it about whether you're Canadian or not, which was appropriate. So they first started out with formatting, nested sorting. So typically in sorting, you have a global sort. And then as you break it down into further detail, you say, oh, well, I'd like to be able to see that sorted in multiple layers. And normally, or at least pre this version, you'd have to set up a combo field, sort by that combo field in order for things to come out in the right order. No need to do that anymore. Embedded sheet within the tooltip, that was already discussed. The snapping to the grid is similar to what you would see in a lot of graphics packages or in like PowerPoint, where you can line up text with the axes. And the super nudge I thought was kind of cool that normally if you hit up arrow, it takes forever for something to move. Well, you shift up arrow, you can get it to jump a certain amount, 10 pixels at a time. It makes it really easy to deal with. So here's some sample screens that I thought were kind of cool. They're embedded tooltip, so you can hover over something and have that individual worksheet show up. You can also, here's the grid where you see the laying out. And what they wanted to do is get this grid axes here to line up with the axes here, and you can snap to it by just pulling it over. And then once you're finished, you turn the grid off and it disappears. It's kind of nice. that got, it's also interesting when you're in a crowd, this is a huge arena, of how many people start cheering. And they go, oh, this saves so much time. Ooh. So it's kind of, it's, yes, geeking out is truly what's going on that way. So in mapping, the whole notion of spatial files and being able to take a shapefile, KML file, and be able to load it directly in, and instead of having to convert these things into some sort of static file and then load it up, you have a way to go directly from SQL or from a database, pull up the shapefile and have it dynamically loaded into your visualization. I thought it was really, really cool. And once you've loaded it in, you can drag that directly on your canvas, and boom. In this case, they showed Seattle neighborhoods popped out, and you're able to then take a look at the neighborhood name, put it into color, and voila, you had a map that shows all the neighborhoods color-coded. Very neat. The nice thing about that too is once you have that spatial boundaries set, you're then able to do sets. So you can say, I want to take a look at all real estate transactions within each neighborhood and total up the total value, the number of records. And that kind of combination wasn't possible before. It's very neat. And so that spatial join was something that was very, very key to it, and you'll see that in the sample screen coming up. Aggregating data within boundaries, and then heat mapping. Inside of my day job, one of the things we do with heat mapping is to take a look at wavelengths being used inside of an optical network. And we'll use heat mapping to understand where is there congestion inside of the network, which is pretty cool. And I presented on that at the conference, and we can probably set up a separate time to discuss it. But anyway, inside of spatial joins, you see this polygon shape as a column that's pulled in as part of the spatial source. And then once you've pulled it in, you can then do spatial joins, and you'll see a new field here called intersects that allow you to take those two spatial pieces and link them together. So now the neighborhood understands the real estate transactions, and they're able to kind of work together. So that was really pretty cool. An example of that they gave rat sightings in New York, which is really funny because they start out, now we're going to talk about New York, and there's a big cheer in the crowd. Rat sightings in New York. Oh, okay, whatever. And say, well, when you take a look at this from a scatter plot perspective, it really doesn't give you the full impact of where's the greatest density. And then you can turn around, let's see, there we go. And you start seeing, okay, one of the things the guy mentioned is now you know exactly where the best pizza is. So I thought that was pretty funny. And in a similar format, we take a look at Boston Marathon. And when you do a density analysis, you can then take a look at age groups and common times for those different age groups, which is pretty cool. And by the way, this presentation I give to Brittany, and it'll be uploaded so you can pull it down. So that's mapping. Enterprise. Marcelo was from Uruguay, and he was a riot. And I thought he was just really funny. He said, the biggest thing, Uruguay is #1 in the world, number of cows per capita. Anyway, delightful guy. Anyway, export as an earlier version of desktop. So when you have people in your community who are not on maintenance and they're not upgraded, you have a way of saving your workbook into an earlier version for them to be able to pull up. Very cool. That's also available as published as inside of a server version. So that if your server version is a previous version of Tableau, it can backdate the version so that it can be uploaded that way and be accessible. Very strong. Thought that was really cool. He was running his examples on a Linux version of Tableau, which was very neat. And then the idea of the services manager, being able to have a browser interface to be able to do a make before break, if you're familiar with the voltage kind of things, be able to change things without having to do a soft restart. So as you load up new processes on your server, new configurations, new resources, you can just push those on and have it activated without having to do a restart and get a mess of angry people calling you up at 2 a.m. REST API support, very popular. I like that because our company, I work for Sienna. Our company uses REST APIs for network configuration changes. So if we have a way of taking that REST API information and using that to link in with our network APIs, maybe there's a way to kind of work those two things together. So we up the resources as we download a new version of network configuration. And then he had some shell scripting to be able to automate changes that had ASCII versions of cows on them. So I thought that was pretty clever. So I know this is very faint. It'll be easier to see on the downloaded copy of it, but this was an example of the browser interface where he was able to set up additional cycles, additional resources and CPUs. Next, data governance. I thought there was a general theme as part of the keynote to saying governance is not locking out people from the data. It's giving them access to data with the right level of certification. So you know when you're, I mean, one of my coworkers likes to call it truthiness, that when you pull up a data resource, if you have 100 different data sources inside of your server, which one do you want to pull up first? Well, you want to have the ones that have been certified as being the ones that you trust the most. And so that's what happens here. You can certify a data source, and by certifying it, it's like searching on Google. It flows up to the top of the list when you take a look at the overall rankings. And then you're able to take a look and double click on it and see the metadata, who did the certification. You're able to see when it was last updated, things like that. There is a new visual cue. It's a cylinder, a three-dimensional cylinder that is up along the toolbar. So you can check on that, and it shows, it drops down and shows you all the data sources associated with your workbook, as well as an indication of whether or not it's certified or not, which is kind of nice. So that when you deal with truthy data and truthful data, you can kind of see how the blend happened. It's also kind of nice because when you drill down to those data sources, it will also show you the calculations being used within that data table. So if you have calculated fields, you can open it up and see the formulas being used. So anybody who wants to go in from an auditing standpoint and understand where things were, how did you get to that result, can go through that pretty straightforward. You also see the number of workbooks using that data source. So when you open up FooBar, it will say, oh, FooBar is being used in 50 different locations, which is kind of nice to see. The other part we can see here too is if you have a data source, if you're pulling up a list of data sources, it will also say, the most recommended is at the top of the list. And then when you choose that one to be added to what you're using, it can recommend which field to use and what join type to use to be able to pull that information in the most effectively based on how other people have done it. Very, very clever. So here are some examples. Once again, a little bit easier to see if you don't have to squint. But here we see the cylinder icon, and then we have a list, and then there are little light bulbs next to them to say whether or not it's been certified. And then when you click on these, you can see a summary of the workbook, and you see connected workbooks to that data source. It says 40 on there. There's crowdsourcing on the bottom where things get floated up to the top. And then you can see a recommended type of join to be used with that data source. Web authoring. This was really cool. I didn't expect to be psyched about this because I normally think in terms of you have a phase where you run things on a desktop and then you publish it, and if you want to make further revisions, well, then you go back to the desktop version and you post it again or update. Here, the idea is there are certain levels of latitude or flexibility you can have at the very tail end of things. It's already been published, and you can go in and then edit the groups. You can drill in and out of detail by dragging the field into the group so that you can then turn around and redefine it. The axis editing, changing names of axes and moving them about. Text boxes, same thing. The whole idea of annotating things, circling around different pieces of a graph or visualization, and then say, I want to send this to so-and-so and have that screenshot dumped inside an email and sent out. Is just that level of flexibility and interactivity I thought was really, really cool. And the last part of this was pre-built content for popular popular data sources like Salesforce and ServiceNow and QuickBooks, be able to pull things out and already have a set of pre-canned templates can get you 60% there. That's a really beautiful thing. Then you spend most of your time dealing with what type of questions you're trying to answer rather than trying to get that framework in place. So here we have ServiceNow, Salesforce, QuickBooks, Oracle, Eloqua, Marketo, and Google Analytics as being the pieces that they're starting out with. The other thing the presenter wanted to mention is that a lot of these things that they're rolling out right now for desktop, they're also rolling out for web authoring at the same time moving forward. So there'll be a tighter train, a tighter development train between the two sets. And there's a go over that. So I spent a little bit of time in the labs. I spent some time with the spatial folks. I spent some time with the Maestro guys, where they pulled up a little bit of data. And like Edwin mentioned, they do have some histogram type information to be able to give a better sense of how the data sits and whether or not there's a suitability purpose there. Typically in my work, I'm pulling together 16 to 30 different data sources and trying to make them cross-correlate properly. And so Maestro probably isn't the best use for me on that particular topic. But what it does do is they had a list similar to Superstore, but it was a list of people's names, addresses, telephone numbers, and what they've been buying. And you could then take a look at odd telephone numbers, odd zip codes, addresses with or company names with extra spaces or extra commas in there, or maybe comma Inc. or no comma followed by Inc. or incorporated spelled out. And it does a lot of those fuzzy searches and allows you to build out a set of steps to clean that data to a finished state. And then you can go back through those steps in a very simplified, almost Alteryx-like, or in my case, LavaStorm, be able to pull and take a look at those individual steps, make some edited changes, and then you can use that the next time that the data source comes across your table. It uses regular expressions for grouping. As far as I could tell, it didn't have any sort of external validation, external lookup kind of things already linked into it. It was primarily you're provided a CSV file or an Excel tab, and it's up to you to kind of figure out what you believe those things ought to be, and then based on histogram, be able to combine them and get them ready to be loaded into Tableau. Would you say that's fair, Edwin? But I think that they're thinking the right way, because a lot of what they were asking me about during the lab session was, basically, where are your eyes going? You're presented with this screen as a user interface. You're trying to manipulate the data. What do you think this means? What do you think that means? Or where do you think it should be? What do you want to do next? Or what kind of questions are you asking about your data next? And they were jotting down notes badly. So that was kind of cool to see that level of interaction between the lab folks and me with the sample data trying to make the C do what they wanted it to do. But that was really, really cool. So that's all I have on the demo, the dev stuff. I can go a little bit further and talk about my presentation, or we could just say that for another time. Okay, fair enough. Great, thanks a lot.
Next we have Cesar Pico. This was his third time attending Tableau conference. His favorite part is badge pickup.
I love it. I'll explain. I'll explain.
His favorite new feature is projects and projects on Tableau server.
Oh, that's
and his favorite type of graph is a
bivariate choropleth. Thank you, Brittany. Yes. So I'm Cesar Pico. I wanted to go through and present about my favorite Data 17 session. One thing I really love about Tableau conference, and I've told, if you've talked to me about conference or at conference, I tell everybody this. It's like going to summer camp. You come back every year, and that's why badge pickup is one of my favorite parts. It's like getting dropped off at summer camp. you get to see people right there picking out their badges, and everyone's kind of, it's new, some type of hairstyle, a lot of new information. So it's great. Also, one thing about Tableau Conference too is I kind of go back to childhood a little bit too, and being a parent, I know to take kids to a playground, and they make friends immediately. They start talking to other kids, and they're playing with other kids, and that's actually kind of what conference is like. You're kind of encouraged to talk to other people about the kind of work they're doing, how long they've used Tableau, and you start making these friendships. You go pick up a sandwich, you sit down with someone. Oh my gosh, that's so interesting. What are you working on? And it's really easy to do, and it kind of takes me back to my school days. So I'll get back to that in just a little bit. But now, my life personally, is pretty much spent either thinking about data or my kids. Those are not my kids. Those are the kids who came with a picture frame. If this was a bar chart, though, it would probably be kids around 90%, 10% data. So that's my normal day. I do have these two parts, very big parts of my life. I was really excited, though, when that woman over there, Brittany Fong, told me about something called Data Kids. What's Data Kids? Oh my gosh, it is kids that are, it's a tag on Twitter. And you'll see it along there too. They're different. Now these are different kids that are putting up their visualizations they've built in Tableau. Some of these more good than others. But yeah, Data Kids. It's a tag. It's a tag on Twitter for children that are actually using Tableau and using it effectively. So I have kids. I tried. I tried. I thought Data Kids would be a lot of fun, but I worked with my older daughter, Sophia, and we did something with a Raspberry Pi. I don't know if you guys are familiar with them. Small single board computers. They're about $35, but they run like a full computer. You run Linux on it. She had a lot of fun building that and putting that together. And one question that she had was, Dad, it'd be really cool if I knew where that airplane was going that was over our house. I know a hacky thing we can do with the Raspberry Pi. We can build a tracker with a little antenna, and we can find out where that airplane is going. So we built one and put it together, and it running for a little bit. So I'm like, let's go through and visualize this. She had zero interest in doing the Tableau work. So I built something, just a really quick chart that kind of showed the planes that were flying over my house. This really kind of shows what's in the air up there. So she could take a look. And this was kind of fun for her. The kids looked when my wife flew back to Germany for a family event. I'm like, oh, let's find Mommy's plane. And we could track her along all this. A lot of fun. I tried. Not a lot of success with the whole Data Kids. But I did want to introduce you to probably one of the most famous Data Kids out there. And I don't know if you guys, anybody familiar with Data Kids? Yeah, okay, a few. One of the most famous Data Kids out there. This is Joe Radburn. Joe, in this picture, he's 8 years old. Now, something Joe has done is, well, he uses Tableau on a day-to-day basis. Well, mostly weekly basis. He's built some beautiful, beautiful visualizations. Now, how did he get into this? Well, this is the session. The session at Tableau was called Visiting with Joe. What an 8-year-old tells us about using Tableau. It's actually incredibly informative to hear about the creativity that comes from an 8-year-old. One of the things that Joe's really, really popular for, well, is also, first, his dad. Joe's dad is Rob Radburn. If you're not familiar with Rob, Rob is a Tableau Zen master. He's from Leicester in the United Kingdom. And he builds some amazing, amazing charts. Something else he's done is he was also in the 100% club for Makeover Monday. Does everybody know what Makeover Monday is? Has anybody actually completed Makeover Mondays? Couple hands. Awesome. Awesome. So Rob was in the 100% club for Makeover Monday. He actually went through and did each Makeover Monday every Monday. I'll get into that in just a little bit too. Now, what does this have to do with Joe? So, Joe's a regular participant in Makeover Monday too. He saw his dad doing this and he kind of looked over and went, hey, what's that? And he started doing this and he started posting his visualizations. Rob helped him out a bit, but he actually was really intrigued in the fact that Joe kind of took this and ran with it. He's a regular participant in Makeover Monday. Now, one of the cool things about this too is that if you look back here, this t-shirt over here, he actually has his 100% Club t-shirt for 2016, where he completed all 52 weeks of Makeover Monday for 2016. Amazing, amazing just feat in itself. This is Joe. Now, at work, I do a lot of new user walkthroughs. If you've ever been through one of my new user walkthroughs, just start out by showing some of the visualizations that Joe built. Don't show his face. And try to get an idea, or pretty much just what the audience thinks. And then I will go back and show Joe's face, and pretty much the audience erupts in a lot. It's one of those things where it's fun to go through and teach folks Tableau, but also when they know an 8-year-old building some of these visualizations, it makes it a lot easier to kind of grasp a lot of the concepts and just know it's not going to be as hard or as complicated as you think it might be. Joe's got some excellent visualizations. If you see, his newest one is "When are you expected to die?" Exclamation point. You may not want to take that one out, or maybe so, maybe not. But excellent. You've got an excellent Tableau public profile here. Now, something that Rob has actually mentioned about Joe, and a critique that he has about his son's visualizations are, number one, his comment stands a lot in his visualizations. Number two, packed bubble charts. Lots of packed bubbles. He loves packed bubbles. And yes, you can have too many bubbles. So these are slides from Rob's presentation. Rob was actually gracious enough and he shared these slides with me about this really great presentation, and I'm paraphrasing and I'm not doing as close a great job as Rob does. And he's describing these. So Joe builds out of this. You can see Comic Sans, lots of bubbles and lots of colors. So, but still, really, he's going through and learning a lot about Tableau every week. You see, from week to week, you start seeing great progression. Something Rob mentioned too is, does he want to bring this up? Does he want to actually kind of deter him from using a lot of these things that he actually likes doing, he enjoys doing every week? So he added this quote from Pablo Picasso. Now, throughout the 52 weeks of Makeover Monday, and since then, Rob has taken away a lot from watching his son work through Tableau. One of the very first lessons is how much data viz background do you really need? How much do you really need to know? He starts off with just a pic of some of the books that he's got in his personal library. All excellent books. But we can pretty much assume that Joe has not read many of those, even though I've seen a lot of pictures of him with books, with a lot of the visualization books in his spare time. But he gets feedback that his visualizations are, yeah, they are better than some corporate dashboards I've seen. When Joe gets feedback, it's usually from Tableau Zen masters, usually people who really know a lot about visualization. So, and it's true. I've come into offices and seen some really horrifying visualizations, and Joe does can actually do pretty well as an 8-year-old building a lot of these visualizations. Something he also brings up, this is Rob, Schneiderman's mantra. Now, Professor Schneiderman is a computer science professor at the University of Maryland. Something he talks about is this mantra where kind of for user design in technology, this can be a free to do a lot of different things. Start off with your overview, zoom and filter in, and then have details on demand. This works really well for dashboarding as well. Start off with that overview, kind of zoom in and let people filter in, and then finally get those details when someone clicks on something. Somebody wants, really a tooltip. So that works out really well. Now, Rob shows, Joe's kind of doing this. He's giving you that general overview, letting you kind of detail in on some of these items or filter in and see these. He also pointed out a really cool thing that Joe did here when building annotations. So using that stock arrow, but you went through and just used a bunch of dashes and put that arrowhead there. Very creative. Also, same idea here, job opportunities for nations. I'm going to read this out because this is excellent. There is more chance to get a job in America than Italy. Happy face, frowny face. Or I'm sorry, yeah, happy face, frowny face. Really, this is something, I mean, yes. Now the bottom one is even better. Yes. Wow, I just want to call America the job country. When he posted this for Makeover Monday, he mentioned something about moving to the United States when he's 18 to look for work. So yes, very creative. Something else. Now, this was a Makeover Monday week where the challenge was to go through and look at subscribers, and they just had really YouTube video data. Something Joe did, and Rob pointed this out, is just he never thought about this. And I looked at it and like, yeah, I'd never do that, but I think I want to. Is he added in Joe's verdict. And he knew all of these, he actually knew and watched a lot of these YouTubers. And he'd gone through and he added his own verdict on their shows. And I like Stampy because he does loads of epic gameplays. And these are hilarious, but they're really good because he's actually added in his own data and joined this to the Makeover Monday, which you don't see that often. Very good, and also I think sometimes thinking like an 8-year-old is kind of a good process for creativity as well. Something else he's learned: keep on moving. Joe has his workflow. This is kind of how he goes through his visualizations. He added this, really is always keep trying, give it another shot. And Joe does an excellent job of really going through, continuing, and publishing and posting. Also, Joe has taught his dad a couple of new things in Tableau as well. I wish I had the video for this, but so Rob had gone through and asked Joe to remove a reference line. And he was fascinated to see the way Joe did it. Normally for us, you say remove a reference line, you hover over the reference line, right click, and click remove reference line. He was surprised to see Joe just go grab the reference line and drag it off into the gray area. So much faster. And the best part is you see guys, Iron Fist champions going, you're joking, right? That can't be real. Andy Kriebel, you've got a Zen Master going, wait, what? I had no idea. Also, one last thing he points out too is the Tableau community helps you grow. You guys are all part of the Tableau community. One thing that the Tableau community uses a lot of is Twitter. Rob had actually, I guess, when Joe had started off, he was using Rob's Twitter account. He was only 8-year-old with a Twitter account, but still, one of the things he pointed out in the full slide deck was that Joe usually gets far more likes than Rob does on a lot of the visualizations. And Joe's, if you're on Twitter and you don't subscribe to Joe's Twitter feed, definitely go do it. Send him a quick message and let him know how inspirational he is, because he's doing a great job. And I love that he's gaming, Lego, writing, golf, and Tableau. But yeah, through the community, a lot of support comes from the community. There's a lot of help also from the community to get stuck. It's a great place to go. Joe shows that Twitter is actually a great resource for us in the database world. And something that Rob finishes off his presentation with is this slide here. Really showing off the, it's mostly about really just staying a beginner, not necessarily getting too fancy. Rob is a Zen master. He's a master at this, but he's still learning from his 8-year-old son. One thing I got a message from Rob right before this. He's like, make sure you let people know too. Something that the point of my presentation wasn't really about Joe, and it wasn't really about Rob. It was more about the tool itself and how easy it is for people to just pick up the tool and run with it. If an 8-year-old can do it, the next time you're at work and you have someone complaining about how difficult Tableau is or how complicated something is, just think an 8-year-old can do this. As for me, going back to my data kids, I still have one more chance. One more chance. Thank you.
Next we have Sarah and Russ. So Sarah and Russ have both been to the Tableau conference twice. Sarah's favorite part is all of her hands-on sessions. There are a lot of. Her favorite new feature is Piper. And her favorite type of graph is a bar, which I would agree with. She says boring but powerful workhorse, which I totally agree with. Russ's favorite part about Tableau conference was devs on stage. His favorite new feature is within the tooltip, but also likes the ability to save and publish directly to older versions of Tableau, definitely. And his favorite graph type is also bar chart variations.
Thanks. I'm Russ Phillips from the Holocaust Museum. I've been there about 18 years. Sarah has also been there for the last about 7 years. She's a lead developer at Holocaust for Tableau. And then I'm the director of financial systems and the fundraising technical team. So today we're going to tell you about our first experience presenting at the Tableau conference. It's kind of the inside track of what we went through. If at any point, if you have questions on any parts of it, just stop us and feel free to ask. Our presentation was about identifying and cultivating untapped prospects. In the development world, we have a ton of data on over 1 million different donors, so it makes it really interesting what you can do with Tableau. So we thought it made a good topic to present there.
And we're on the TC Live site, so those are the links to the information, and you'll be able to see them when it's posted.
So one of the first questions is, who can present at Tableau? People who are, they usually go for people that are full-time employees of a corporate or of a group. And one very important distinction is it's the people, not the company, that is the presenters. So when they accept somebody, it's only for that speaker. It's not for the company. You can't switch somebody else out. They do let up to 2 different people be on the stage to present. One of the things that we didn't know at first was that they do allow for a 3rd person to be kind of the driver. We had a kind of complex data model, and it was pretty difficult to both talk and walk through the model and get examples right within the right time frame. So it was really helpful to have a 3rd person up on stage with us going through and running the Tableau model. After each of the presentations, they usually look for a 15-minute time period. There you can bring up other people that you have with you. If you have consultants, if you have additional people on your team, they can fill in and help out answer all the questions. So for what you can present, is kind of industry specific, and each year they'll put up different kind of bullets of what they're looking for. But we found it to be very open and flexible as far as what was interesting for the presentations. We did find, though, talking with them, that they had a very strong preference for things that had been around for a little while and have a proven track record. They didn't want to hear much about things that we were still working on or still in part of development. One of the questions that we've got often is, what kind of benefits do you get? It was very nice. They gave us a free pass for one person to attend the conference. Doesn't cover any hotels or airfare. We were also invited to, I guess, VIP access to some events. We didn't make it to too many of those, so I can't tell you how good or not they were. They did have a welcome party for all the speakers, and they gave us a little speaker gift, which was pretty nice. It was a little kind of Bluetooth speaker, portable speaker. So timeline for submission. In here, this is an area that was kind of a learning curve for us, just finding out all the different things that you go through as you present for Tableau. So, each year will be a little bit different than when the conference was. I'm just going to walk through the timelines of what we went through. At the end of March is when the speaker submission was due. For this, it was basically an abstract, a questionnaire, some bio description on who the presenters would be. Then they do give you the option, if you have a data model or if you have a presentation already ready, you can go ahead and upload it at that point. Where we were pretty busy with a lot of other things, and we didn't really want to go to all the work of doing a presentation if we weren't going to get selected. So we just kind of gave the abstract. About 2 to 3 weeks after we put in the abstract, or filled out our forms and everything, we heard back that they accepted or at least we made it through the first round. They, based on our industry, they signed us a Tableau representative. So that Tableau representative, we set up a screening time, and we had about a 45-minute time period where we kind of walked him through what we thought we would present. He asked us questions. It was pretty free form and open. He kind of gave us some suggestions on what would be more helpful or the directions that they thought would be useful. A little bit after that, I guess in May, is when we got our official acceptance. From there, in July was when we had to have the draft version of our presentation ready. Tableau, in the speaker portal, they give you a lot of helpful tools. They had a ton of different templates, speaker guidelines. We used all those things. It was, at the beginning, going through and making sure we were on the right track was, a little bit to wrap your head around. But they were great with the whole process. So we put in our draft presentation. Then in August, we went through and had the first presentation with our assigned Tableau representative. It was a very good experience, interesting to see what they went. They pretty much went through our presentation and cut off about half the slides. They definitely wanted it to be very clean, a lot less slides, more talking, and certainly a large focusing on demoing our actual Tableau models. So we went back to the drawing board, we made some modifications, then we resubmitted the final final-ish presentation in September. We actually kept working on it and tweaking it all the way up through to the conference. There was also a lot of other really good things along the way. They offered to us that if we wanted to have professional speaking coaches review again our presentation and coach different speakers, that was available. We also had a team of people that were available to review our PowerPoint and give additional suggestions. So, super helpful along the way. One of the things that made us a little bit nervous is you don't find out, how many sessions you're going to be doing, where you're going to be presenting, any of the details, even like the day that you'll be presenting, until a couple days before the conference, or at least we didn't. So that was pretty interesting. Made it hard, with travel arrangements and everything too, and make sure we had enough time beforehand and had all the right people at the right time. So when we got out to Vegas, we got there a day early. We checked in. They do a great job they have a technical check-in room. So for all the speakers, they gave a set time when we were supposed to be there to meet with our technical rep. We got there, checked in. They had a whole handful of all the different kind of adapters for any type of computer, And then we had one time they had to go into a second drawer where they had even more. So they were really good. They gave us a quick tutorial. They had, what would you call it? That switching board.
Yeah, they have a board underneath the computer that you can like blank out your screen and all that. So it's nice and easy to use.
If you're going from like a PowerPoint over to your Tableau model, they didn't want to show all that transition, so you blank out the screen and then you move it over. Go through everything with like the lavalier, I mean, all the mics, volumes, what people prefer between lavalier or handheld mics. Shortly thereafter, we got to see the room that we were presenting in. This was extremely important for us because we didn't have the best room. We had a podium, and then we had a bar, like a big pillar, I guess. So you couldn't see the screen on one side of it. And from where you were on the podium, you couldn't use the laser pointer to point at anything. So it made it a little bit challenging. And the other thing was it's real important to the projectors that they had were 1920 by 1080. The laptop that we were using, the monitor didn't support that much resolution. So we ended up, day of, we switched over to a laptop that made it easier and the presentation looked a lot better. But also in the rooms that we went to, our Tableau workbook, the colors really washed out once they were put on the screen. It looked great on all of our computers, but it did not show up at all. So we kind of adjusted on the fly. The other thing is, even on some of our workbooks, where the breakpoints were, didn't work well for the projector. So we kind of adjust and change the sizing day of, or well, on the technical day, make everything flow better. It was nice that they had dedicated AV people in each room, so that they really, any questions you had, they reassured you that, they would be there and they would take care of it. It's kind of funny, the first guy that we worked with, he promised us he would be there, then it came to the presentation day, nowhere to be found. But they had a good replacement, so everything worked out fine. So one of the things that they never really said anything, we weren't sure about it. We work for a nonprofit, and our model had donor data in it. PII, or personally identifiable information, is extremely important to us. So we were kind of concerned on what lengths we were going to have to go to for having this demo, whether they're going to want our workbook, was it going to be put on a corporate server, what was going to happen. The nice thing is that they let us use our equipment, which we chose to do because they also had equipment there that we could use, but we didn't want any other variables. We wanted to make sure that we kind of controlled the experience. So we got to keep the Tableau workbook on our computers. We didn't have to share that part. We just had to share the PowerPoints, the slides, and the video. And so we were confident that all of the PII that was in our workbook was safe and secure. Another thing that we found really helpful along the way was we rehearsed in front of some of our colleagues and got feedback from them, and that changed how our presentation went. We had certain handoff points. And even with our Tableau driver, who Sarah drove this one, it was really helpful to actually have it up on screen, walk through, and make sure that we had the timing right on each of the things. If you were one of the featured presenters in the big rooms, you got teleprompters. For the people that were in the smaller rooms, like us, we didn't have a teleprompter or anything, so it's a little more challenging when you're talking for 45 minutes to an hour. The other thing is just the timing of it. Make sure everything is pretty organized and right on time. So we had to make sure that we had everything timed appropriately and had enough time for question and answers at the end.
One thing I want to mention is I think we had a great time doing it with a lot of resources. And if you have the chance, you should really apply because I think you could get a lot out of it.
I absolutely agree. The coach or the person that was assigned to us, he was 100% there throughout the process, and maybe even a little bit too much so. He's probably emailing us every other day, asking us anything else you need, anything we can help with. So it was a great experience.
And kind of off topic, but the other thing I want to mention, if anybody works for a nonprofit, we're starting a nonprofit TUG sometime in the next quarter. Please come talk to me so I can make sure you're on the list. Though Tableau will also send stuff up, and I think Brittany will as well. So, and I guess if you guys have any other questions about presenting, you can reach out to us by email or I'm on Twitter. So yeah. Okay, awesome. Thanks, guys.